In just 37 seconds, music legend Cher went from gracious guest to absolutely livid, unleashing a verbal assault that left Kelly Clarkson visibly shaken and the studio audience in stunned silence. What started as lighthearted banter about decades in the entertainment industry quickly spiraled into the most explosive confrontation in daytime television history, with Cher calling out the host's integrity before dramatically storming off set in front of millions of viewers. The tension began brewing the moment Cher settled into the plush interview chair opposite Kelly Clarkson. The iconic singer, promoting her upcoming memoir, seemed relaxed initially, flashing that trademark smile and engaging in the usual pre-interview pleasantries. But seasoned Cher watchers could detect something simmering beneath the surface, a slight tightness around her eyes, the way she gripped her coffee mug just a fraction too hard. Kelly, dressed in a bright yellow blazer that seemed almost aggressively cheerful, launched into her opening questions with her usual bubbly energy. Cher, you've been in this business for over 6 decades, which is just incredible. You've seen so many changes, worked with so many people. I'm curious about your thoughts on how the industry treats women differently now versus when you started. Cher's response was measured but carried an undercurrent of steel. Well, Kelly, I've always believed in speaking truth to power. The industry has changed in some ways, but in others, it's still the same old boys' club. Women still have to fight twice as hard for half the recognition. She paused, her dark eyes studying Kelly intently. Though I suppose some people are more willing to play the game than others. The comment landed with subtle weight, and Kelly's smile flickered for just a moment before she recovered. That's so true. I mean, I've been fortunate in my career, starting with American Idol and now having my own show. I feel like I've been supported by some amazing people in the industry. Supported, Cher repeated, the word hanging in the air like a challenge. That's an interesting way to put it. I've heard you've been quite accommodating to certain executives over the years. Very team player mentality. The studio audience began to sense something shifting. A few nervous laughs punctuated the silence, as Kelly's media-trained composure showed hairline cracks. I'm sorry, what do you mean by accommodating? Cher leaned back in her chair, her posture relaxed but her gaze laser-focused. Oh, you know exactly what I mean, honey. The whispers about how you handle things behind the scenes. How you've never really rocked the boat, never asked the hard questions when it mattered, always playing it safe, always keeping the machine happy. Kelly's cheeks flushed pink, and she let out a laugh that sounded forced even to viewers at home. I think there might be some misunderstanding here. I pride myself on being authentic with my audience and my guests. I've always tried to create a space where people feel comfortable sharing their stories. Comfortable for who, though? Cher's voice had dropped to that dangerous low register that anyone familiar with her work knew meant business. Because I've talked to some of your former production staff, Kelly. I've heard stories about the working conditions on this show, about how you treat people when the cameras aren't rolling, about how you've thrown people under the bus to protect your own image. The accusation hit Kelly like a physical blow. Her carefully maintained composure began to crack as she gripped the arms of her chair. I don't know where you're getting this information, but that's completely untrue. I work hard to create a positive environment for everyone on my team. Cher's laugh was sharp and humorless. Positive environment? Is that what you call it when you scream at interns for bringing you the wrong coffee? When you refuse to acknowledge crew members by name? When you make writers work 18-hour days during the holidays because you need to maintain your brand? The studio had gone dead silent. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut away. Kelly's face had gone from pink to deep red, and her voice when she spoke was tight with barely controlled anger. I think you need to be very careful about making accusations like that without proof, Cher. This is live television, and what you're saying could be considered defamatory. Defamatory? Cher's eyebrows shot up, and for the first time, genuine fire entered her voice. Oh, honey, you want to talk about defamation? Let's talk about how you've built your entire America's sweetheart persona on the backs of people you've systematically mistreated. Let's talk about how you've silenced complaints with NDAs and threats. Kelly shot to her feet, the sudden movement causing her microphone to feedback with a sharp squeal. That is enough. I will not sit here and let you attack my character based on whatever gossip you've been fed. You don't know me, you don't know how I run my show, and you certainly don't know what kind of person I am. Cher remained seated, utterly calm in the face of Kelly's outburst, which only seemed to make the host's loss of composure more stark. Oh, but I do know, Kelly. I know exactly what kind of person you are. You're the kind who smiles for the cameras while destroying people behind the scenes. The kind who preaches about kindness and authenticity, while being neither kind nor authentic. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Kelly stood trembling with rage, her careful media training completely abandoned as years of suppressed frustration bubbled to the surface. The audience sat in shocked silence, witnessing what felt like the complete unmasking of their beloved host. But Cher wasn't finished. As Kelly struggled to regain her composure, the music legend was preparing to deliver the blow that would shatter whatever remained of this interview's facade of civility. You know what really gets me, Kelly? Cher's voice cut through the tension like a blade, each word deliberately chosen for maximum impact. It's the hypocrisy. You sit there every single day preaching about mental health awareness, about supporting other women, about creating safe spaces. But where was that energy when Sarah Martinez tried to speak up about the harassment she faced from your executive producer? Kelly's face went white as a sheet. The name Sarah Martinez clearly meant something to her, and the recognition was written all over her features. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you dare lie to me, Cher snapped, her legendary composure finally cracking to reveal the fire underneath. Sarah Martinez, 23 years old, production assistant on your show for 8 months. She came to you personally about what David Kellerman was doing to her and other young women on the staff. And what did you do? You had her escorted out of the building and made sure she'd never work in Hollywood again. The studio audience gasped audibly. This wasn't just celebrity gossip anymore. This was a serious allegation being broadcast live to millions of viewers. Kelly's hands were visibly shaking now, and she looked around desperately, as if searching for an escape route. That's not how it happened, Kelly stammered, but her voice lacked any conviction. There were complications with that situation that you don't understand. Complications? Cher's voice rose to a pitch that could have shattered glass. A young woman comes to you for help, and you call it a complication? You threw her to the wolves to protect your precious show and your relationship with the network. That girl had to move back home to Ohio and work at a fucking grocery store because you decided your career was more important than her safety. The profanity hit the broadcast like a thunderclap. FCC violations were the least of anyone's concerns now as the full weight of Cher's accusations began to sink in. Kelly's publicist could be seen frantically gesturing from the wings, but the host seemed paralyzed, unable to mount any kind of coherent defense. You don't understand the pressures I was under, Kelly finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. The network, the advertisers, the ratings, there are so many moving pieces. Oh, spare me the sob story. Cher shot back, rising from her chair with the fluid grace of someone half her age. You had a choice, and you chose yourself, just like you always do. Just like you did when Marcus Thompson tried to unionize the writers and mysteriously found himself blacklisted after your little chat with network executives. Kelly's mouth fell open in genuine shock. Who told you about Marcus? People talk, honey. Especially people who've been screwed over by America's supposed sweetheart. Cher began pacing now, her energy filling the entire studio. Did you really think you could keep all of this quiet forever? That your army of lawyers and NDAs would keep everyone silent while you played the innocent victim of industry pressures? The host was completely unraveling now, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks as years of carefully constructed public image crumbled in real time. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. I was trying to protect the show, protect jobs for hundreds of people. Protect jobs? Cher whirled around to face Kelly directly, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. You mean protect your paycheck? Let's be honest about what this is really about. You were making $35 million a year, and you weren't about to let some production assistant's complaints about sexual harassment threaten that, were you? The figure hit the studio like a bomb. Even in an industry known for excessive salaries, $35 million was staggering. And it cast Kelly's actions in an even more damning light. The audience was completely silent now, transfixed by the complete destruction of someone they had trusted and admired for years. Kelly seemed to realize that her carefully maintained facade was gone forever. When she spoke again, her voice had changed completely. Gone was the bubbly, warm tone that had made her famous, replaced by something cold and defensive. "You think you're so much better than me?" Kelly snarled, wiping tears from her face with the back of her hand. "You think your hands are clean? I've heard stories about you too, Cher. About how you treated backup dancers in the 70s. About the way you handled your son's transition when he was struggling. It was exactly the wrong thing to say." The mention of Cher's son Chaz seemed to flip a switch in the music legend that transformed her from angry to absolutely volcanic. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as Cher's face went completely still. "What did you just say?" The words came out so quietly that the microphones barely picked them up, but everyone in the studio heard the deadly promise in them. Kelly had gone too far, and she knew it. Her media training kicked in desperately as she tried to backtrack. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean that came out wrong. I'm just saying that none of us are perfect." "No." Cher's voice cut through Kelly's babbling like a guillotine. "No, you don't get to apologize now. You want to bring my family into this? You want to attack my son? After everything I've just told you about how you've destroyed people's lives, your response is to go after my child?" The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. This had crossed every line, violated every boundary of basic human decency. Even Kelly's own crew members were looking at her with disgust and horror. But Cher wasn't done. As Kelly realized the magnitude of her mistake, the music legend was preparing to deliver a final, devastating blow that would end not just this interview, but possibly Kelly's entire career. "You know what the difference is between me and you, Kelly?" Cher's voice had become dangerously calm, the kind of quiet that preceded a hurricane. "When my son was going through his transition, when he was at his most vulnerable, I protected him. I stood by him. I didn't exploit his pain for ratings or use his struggles as content for my show. But you've built your entire empire on exploiting other people's vulnerabilities." Kelly stood frozen, realizing she had just sealed her own fate. The mention of Chaz had awakened something primal and protective in Cher that no amount of media training or damage control could contain. "I have sat in this chair for exactly 23 minutes, Cher continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "And in that time, I have watched you lie, deflect, and finally attack my family when you ran out of excuses for your own behavior. Do you know what that tells me about who you really are?" The studio cameras captured every micro-expression on Kelly's face as the full weight of her career-ending mistake became clear. Her publicist was making frantic cutting motions from the wings, but the show's director seemed transfixed by the train wreck unfolding before him. "It tells me that you are exactly the kind of person who would silence a young woman's cries for help to protect your bottom line," Cher said, stepping closer to Kelly with each word. "You are exactly the kind of person who would destroy someone's career over a union vote. And you are absolutely the kind of person who would attack a mother through her child when backed into a corner." Kelly's legs seemed to give out as she sank back into her chair, the fight completely drained out of her. "Cher, please, I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Oh, but you did mean it," Cher cut her off ruthlessly. "That wasn't a slip of the tongue. That was you showing everyone who you really are when the mask comes off. And you know what? I'm glad it happened. I'm glad millions of people just got to see the real Kelly Clarkson." The audience sat in stunned silence as Cher began removing her microphone pack with deliberate, theatrical precision. Every movement was calculated for maximum impact, and she clearly had more to say. "For years, people have asked me about the secret to longevity in this business," she continued, her voice carrying easily throughout the now silent studio. "They want to know how someone like me stays relevant for 6 decades. And the answer is simple: authenticity. Real authenticity. Not the manufactured bullshit you peddle every day." Kelly opened her mouth to respond, but Cher held up a hand that brooked no argument. "I have never, not once in 60 years, had to destroy another person to build myself up. I have never silenced a victim to protect my image. And I have sure as hell never attacked someone's child to win an argument." The contempt in her voice was withering. "Those aren't the actions of someone who deserves the platform you've been given." The music legend began walking toward the studio exit, but she wasn't finished dismantling Kelly's career just yet. She turned back one final time, her voice carrying clearly across the studio floor. "You want to know what I think about the current state of the industry, Kelly? I think it's full of people like you. People who smile for the cameras while being absolute monsters behind the scenes. People who use their platforms to preach about kindness while practicing cruelty. People who mistake fame for character." Kelly had completely crumbled now, sobbing openly as the full scope of her public humiliation became clear. Her tears weren't helping her case. They looked more like self-pity than genuine remorse. "Sarah Martinez deserved better than you," Cher declared, her voice ringing with finality. "Marcus Thompson deserved better than you. Every single person who has worked on this show and suffered under your petty tyranny deserved better than you. And you know what? So does your audience." With that, Cher unclipped her microphone completely and dropped it onto the coffee table between them, with a resounding thud that echoed through the studio like a gavel striking. The sound seemed to break whatever spell had held the audience frozen, and whispers began rippling through the crowd. "This interview is over," Cher announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "And if I were you, Kelly, I'd spend some time figuring out how to make amends to the people you've hurt, because your days of hiding behind that fake smile are finished." She turned on her heel and began striding toward the exit with the regal bearing of someone who had just delivered justice. But Kelly wasn't done making mistakes. In a final act of desperation, she called out, after the departing legend, "You can't just walk away. This is my show. You signed a contract." Cher stopped dead in her tracks and slowly turned back around. The look on her face could have melted steel. "Your show?" she repeated, her voice deadly quiet. "Honey, after what just happened here, you're lucky if you still have a show tomorrow. And as for my contract..." She reached into her purse and pulled out several folded papers, tossing them onto the floor. "My lawyers will be in touch about the hostile work environment clause. Consider this a resignation from any future appearances on whatever discount daytime show you manage to land after this." The papers scattered across the studio floor like confetti at the world's most uncomfortable party. Kelly stared at them in horror, realizing that Cher had come prepared for this exact scenario. This hadn't been a spontaneous outburst. It had been a calculated takedown. Security had appeared at the studio doors, but Cher waved them off dismissively. "I can find my own way out, thanks. I've been leaving bad situations longer than most of you have been alive." As she reached the studio exit, Cher paused one final time to address the audience directly, ignoring Kelly completely. "To everyone who's been hurt by people in positions of power who abuse that trust, your voices matter. Don't let anyone silence you to protect their image. And to everyone watching at home who supported people like Kelly, thinking they were supporting kindness, demand better. You deserve authentic role models, not manufactured ones." With that final statement hanging in the air like smoke from a controlled demolition, Cher walked through the studio doors and disappeared from view, leaving behind her the smoldering wreckage of Kelly Clarkson's career and reputation. Kelly remained in her chair, surrounded by scattered contract pages and the deafening silence of an audience that had just witnessed the complete destruction of someone they had once admired. The cameras kept rolling for several more seconds, capturing Kelly's devastated expression and the stunned faces of the audience, before finally cutting to an unscheduled commercial break. But the damage was done, broadcast live to millions of viewers who had just watched one of daytime television's biggest stars expose herself as a fraud in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. The confrontation was over, but its consequences had only just begun.